Hey guys, hope you're doing well. As we're closing out 2025 and heading to 2026, I thought it'd just be good to talk about, different programming languages we can learn as more of a fun video. And it's kind of help people, figure out where to go in their careers, what they're struggling with, or even like where the job market or IT sector CS is kind of heading next. So I thought it'd be fun to kind of start with a more fun language, more popular language, Python. Python's a pretty popular language. It's one of the most popular. I think it has like 26% share on the Toby language popularity report. And this year, Python actually managed to tackle one of its biggest problems, performance. Python's always had issues with performance because it's an interpreted language, so it interprets down to C++ and other languages. And so because of that, it causes it to have a bit of performance overhead. And so Python introduced their no-GIL mode this year, and this allows it to have better multi-core support and better typing and a faster interpreter. And so in order to continue those improvements, Python next year is actually introducing lazy imports and JIT improvements, or just-in-time compiler. And this will improve the runtime better and will make things even faster going forward. And so real reason why people love Python is because it's an easy language to learn and to read, and it has a massive ecosystem. I think it's probably has one of the most packages, if not the second most, if you're comparing like JavaScript in terms of package support and like what people are adding to the language constantly. And Python is very important in the world of AI and like big data because again, we're looking at everywhere is AI economy at this point. So everything is AI. So just having that AI support and having those AI packages like TensorFlow and others and support for CUDA can help improve or help grow Python's popularity even more, which will happen next year, I think. And so Python though isn't all, good news. It still has issues with performance. Like it's improved, but it still has a bit to go to reach, the levels of something like a C++ or like a C# to really reach that increased performance, especially for those AI workloads, because AI is all about training times, all about in performance. So the faster you can make Python, the more improvements they made, the better it is. But even with all these things considered, I think that Python is still a pretty strong language to learn in 2026. And it has one of the highest job counts. And it's pretty popular. A lot of industries use it. A lot of jobs use it. It's always in demand. So if you're looking for a job, I think Python might be one of the first places to start looking. Especially if you can get really good at Python, learn some of the most popular Python packages like pandas and others. So I put Python as S tier right now in terms of like skill and like what you can do with it. All right, the next one I want to talk about is SQL. So SQL this year added JSON support and graph queries. And so a big thing with SQL is that, it's an object-oriented database, right? So you need like tables and all that. But a lot of those non-object or non-SQL, NoSQL databases like MongoDB or Firebase, they've actually had more flexibility with their databases. So now SQL adding this JSON support kind of helps improve that a bit and kind of help puts that on the step to kind of competing more or integrating more of those non-SQL solutions. And a lot of strength from SQL, especially going to next year and the future, has to do with those AI development. Because I from what I heard, SQL is working even more on improving their database structure and improving their vector databases, actually having vector database integrations. And if you know anything about AI, and the way they store their information is in vector databases. So if you're looking to even get into the AI industry or break through and just have more share in that AI stuff, maybe learning more about SQL and their vector database integrations and things like that will help you get a better job, or if you're looking for a job in the future. And people love SQL because it's universal. Literally every job uses SQL. I haven't had a job in my entire life that in like CS or like software development that hasn't used SQL for databases. And it's declarative, it's powerful, it has it's pretty efficient, and it's required again everywhere. SQL isn't like a general programming language like a Python, like a C++. You can't really build apps off SQL, but if you want to run apps like say Minecraft, for example, you can make it Minecraft in Java, but the data from Minecraft can be stored in a SQL database. Well, it's pretty cool for that. The SQL job market, again, is huge. It's used everywhere. It's always growing. And the issue with SQL, though, if you're looking for a job, is that SQL has a lot, I don't say a high barrier to entry, but a decent barrier to entry, because if you're a hiring manager at a job or an institution, you want to make sure the person you have is actually knows what they're doing with SQL, because there's a lot of risk, especially in production databases, to like damaging customer data or data integrity Because say, for example, a unskilled developer accidentally drops the entire like orders table, right? So that can really disrupt business actions because not all your orders are missing. I'm assuming that if they're a somewhat competent company, they'll have decent backups for that. So even if that happens, but to minimize those risks, no corporation wants someone who doesn't know what they're doing. So learning SQL and actually getting good at it would be important for your future if that's something you're interested in. And I think SQL will continue to grow in 2026, especially with those AI vector databases. So I put it at a solid A tier just because you can't really make apps with SQL, but it's also very important. Now, next I want to talk about Java. So Java is a interesting language. It's one of the oldest programming languages out there. Like not oldest, but it's somewhat like decently old. Like compared to a lot of these languages here, it's an older like programming language. And the thing with Java is that it's very powerful because it has a lot like enterprise support. It has years in the making of improving and growing. And this year they actually added virtual threads, which made Java concurrency more modern. And they added more pattern matching to reduce boilerplate. And Java has become a bit more lightweight as a result as well. And so what they're going to do next year is they're trying to improve their value types and performance focused upgrades. And so because of this, a lot of people love Java because again, it's been out so long that Java has a lot like support, a lot of resources. You can look online, find tons of Java tutorials. Stack Overflow answers so many questions regarding Java. And so it has a massive ecosystem surrounding it. So a lot of places are looking for Java developers and have Java developers working for them. And it's incredibly backwards compliant, which is one thing like the Oracle has worked a lot on, or I think the Open Java community has worked a lot on, is making sure that Java is still backwards compatible. So pretty much every version of Java will work with other versions of Java. It might not have the new features like the newer version, but all the past features. So it makes it easy. Say if you're like a company and you want to upgrade your JVM version to like or your I think it's GRE, Java Runtime Environment, to upgrade to your newest version of Java, then it's pretty straightforward to do that. Few like conflicts, I think, but for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. The issues though with Java is that it struggles with being verbose. There's a lot. Like if you want to make like a main program, like Python is like 4 lines of code, but Java is like 30 lines of code. Like that's right, like string main args, all these other things, right? And they're making improvements towards that, but it's still quite a bit of an issue. And Java is a more heavier programming language. It says that JVM included, which if you're looking for a lightweight environment might cause a few issues. But there's still tons of Java jobs out there. So if you're looking for a job in 2026 with Java or looking to focus your skills, improving that Java skill might not be a bad thing because it helps you land even better jobs. So I guess I'd put Java in the A tier as well. Yeah, I put it in A tier just because it still has issues with verbosity and it can be a slow language at times, especially compile times. But for the most part, it's pretty good. So let's look at JavaScript next. It has the same name as Java, but it's completely different. At first, they were kind of like similar. Like that was a goal, but over time, of course, it's kind of diverged away from Java. But the thing with JavaScript is that JavaScript is the internet. Like almost every website or most of the internet uses JavaScript to run their websites. And JavaScript has a lot of quality of life improvements made this year. And they're doing things like better collections, cleaner async, and smoother iterations. But next year, they're even making more improvements, and they want to improve the decorator and pipeline operators. But what makes JavaScript so popular, though, is that, again, it runs everywhere. If you're doing any modern web development, you have to use JavaScript pretty much because JavaScript, I mean, there's other options, but for the most part, JavaScript is what you're looking for. It has like huge libraries. I say maybe even bigger than Python. It has a lot of support, a lot of tutorials. It's one of the first things a lot of new developers will learn, do web dev, and then has the largest package ecosystem on the earth with NPM as well. A thing that JavaScript struggles though with that might hinder you a bit is that it's very quirky of a language. It's like for example, one of the quirks is the comparison operation, like the equal signs, right? So two equal signs you can compare if the values are the same, right? But it's not actually comparing. I forgot how exactly it works, but it's a really weird comparison. So two values that look the same on the outside may result false if you're checking they're the same. So you do triple equal sign to actually check it. And so that can be a very quirky thing that can trip a lot of people up. It has a bit fewer different quirks like async and variable initialization, all these other things that can kind of make the language a bit annoying to work with. But for the most part, it's okay. JavaScript also has a tooling fatigue, I guess. So say, like every year there's like 15 new JavaScript implementations, right? Like you got like React, Angular, Next, Nux, Vue.js, like a million JavaScript. We got Moo.js. Like every year is like 10 new JavaScript frameworks coming out. And so it can be a bit fatiguing or a bit tiring because if you're a new developer, you just don't know what framework to choose, what direction to go. You do raw JavaScript, but a lot of enterprises aren't doing raw JavaScript anymore. And so it can make it a bit more challenging as a new developer to figure out which direction to go with JavaScript. So I say though, like even with all these things considered, JavaScript is a good direction to go to because there's always room to improve, always things to learn, always jobs available pretty much with JavaScript. And it does run the internet. And there's always that full stack developer position where if you learn JavaScript on the front end, you can learn C++, React, C# on the back end. So it's always that career direction to go to. So I wouldn't say JavaScript is something you should discount. It's something you should look into if you're looking for a job or where to put your focus next year. So with these things considered, I would put it at A tier because those quirks of JavaScript do hinder it. And another thing that hinders it is strong typing, which the next language, TypeScript, actually aims to fix. I'll put TypeScript at A tier here, but I'll explain why. So TypeScript, like JavaScript, has a lot of the same things as JavaScript, but the main thing is that they have strict typing, which means that before you to initialize an object, like say you want to set variable x to be a number, I have to say it's a number. You can't. So in JavaScript, x can be a string, an array, a number, an object. But in TypeScript, you say strictly this is what's going to be. TypeScript has made a lot of improvements this year as well. They've improved their compiler. They've made the type stronger. They've increased their support for editors, and they've also are working on better alignment, making it better integrated with the native JavaScript ecosystem. The reason why a lot of developers love TypeScript is that it helps them catch bugs early. That's the whole pitch of TypeScript, is that with those strong types, you can now catch bugs that in JavaScript might not be expected, because in JavaScript you might set x to be a number, and then somewhere down the line it gets reinitialized and to be an array, and then that now is completely unexpected behavior because you might not realize it was accidentally reinitialized or not. But in JavaScript, in TypeScript, that can happen because if you try to reinitialize it, it'll throw a compiler error. I'll tell you that's not allowed. I mean, you can still have, there's some caveats with that. You can still have, say for example, you send data from the backend and say, okay, this is a car, okay? But then on the front end, your TypeScript object, you say it's a cat. The car object will go into the cat object, but in reality, it's a car. Those things can happen, but for the most part, those strong types do help out a lot. Another downfall of TypeScript is that there can be a bit of a learning curve because it's easy to get started with TypeScript, but the upper echelon, like the actual really good TypeScript, can be, it's same with JavaScript, but can be a challenge. And so it's also easier to kind of make bad code with TypeScript. So if you kind of sometimes need to really know what you're doing. TypeScript, again, has a lot of huge ecosystem, similar to JavaScript. A lot of corporations are actually moving from JavaScript to TypeScript just because of those strict typings. So there is continuing to have growth in the industry with TypeScript, and there's a lot of jobs in the future. So I guess with that, yeah, I'll look at the next language is C#. So C# is my, not Lua, C# is my favorite programming language, and I think it's goated, S tier for sure. And the reason I say C# is S tier is because I guess some of the changes they made this year is they're making cleaner syntax, better patterns, and they're making the code itself faster, like with .NET. And so next year, you're going to continue to make those performance increases, and they're going to try to make less boilerplate, because sometimes this has similar issues to JavaScript that can be boilerplate. But the last couple of years, they actually really worked hard on reducing that boilerplate, which is why I think it's a bit above Java. And so C# is also strong because it has a lot of tooling. It's in that .NET ecosystem, right? So .NET, if you're not aware, is like the framework that Microsoft has made, like C#.NET, C++.NET, F#.NET. And so a lot of these .NET tools can actually work off each other because they all compile into the same .NET, like a machine code, right? So say, for example, you have a code in C#, but you also need this part to run really performatively. And what's a really performative language? C++, right? So there's C++.NET. And so you can take your C# code and put that into this, call a C++ function or class, whatever, have it process the data in the performant C++ way and pass that code back to C#, and that improves your performance a lot. And so also has a lot of tools like with a lot of libraries and things like that that can help you like do memory profiling, static analysis, and many other different things. And also it has a good balance for power and productivity because it has the power you need, but also it doesn't slow you down like a Java in production having to write tons of boilerplate. But I guess a challenge you can say or disadvantage you could say of C# is that it can be a heavy language, right? A lot of boilerplate, and it kind of, you're locked into that Microsoft ecosystem, right? Because C# mostly works on Windows machines. So if you're doing C#, you're probably doing more Windows development than anything else. So there's strong enterprise demand for C# jobs, of course, because so there's a lot of workplace like demand for C#. A lot of places I've worked for have used C#. One of my first jobs was programming in C# and C++. So if you're looking for a job, C# might be a good place to look at, get started. And it's continuing to grow, continuing to have more market share, and it's a pretty dominant language, and they pay pretty well. I think the average job now at C# C++ is like 100K, 90 to 100K, something like that, somewhere between there. And also, I forgot to mention this, a big plus of C# is that if you're looking to game development, right? Unity is a like game development engine. You probably know it. And a lot of the code is written in JavaScript and C#. So if you want to make a game, most of the time you're probably going to be using C# for that. And so that is a huge advantage because if you want to get into game dev, C# might be your way into that, into field, into that industry. So that's something you're looking for to get into next year. Then definitely check out C#. Next one we're going to talk about is another C-based language, C++. And so C++ I place in A tier because C++ has a lot of advantages, but also quite a few issues. So in 2025, C+ made a few changes, make error handling safer and compile time tools better. An issue that C++ has is that it can be very complex to deal with, right? Because C++ code is very verbose. If, for example, like if you want to use like the standard template library, you got like STL, : and so those things can make your C++ code look pretty big. It is like a good language though for things like performance, right? With that in mind though, because it's good for performance, the way I guess that she's at performance is by allowing you to have a lot of control over your code, right? You can manage your memory, you can optimize it, you can improve it in the ways that you need to have that be the most optimal form of code. And because of that, it can be a foot gun because you can have memory leaks because you have access to a lot of memory yourself. You can manipulate it because C can do the same thing, and C++ is built on C. Because of that, you can have issues with memory leaks or memory mismanagement where you're accessing uninitialized data, and bad actors or hackers can get into your system and do that same thing to execute malicious code or remote code execution, which can be a lot of issues. So you look at a lot of CVEs, a lot of them actually relate to C++ or C#, or not C#, C. Another advantage, I guess, on the flip side is that C++ is used a lot in game engines, right? Like League of Legends, Overwatch, I believe. Minecraft Bedrock, it might be C++ or C#. I can't confirm that. But GTA, a lot of games are built on C++, right? And because it's very good with the memory management, with the optimizations that you can make. So if you're looking to get into game programming again, similar to C#, C++ might be something you should look at into 2026. And there's always good jobs for C++. Now, the caveat with that is that C++ programmers need to be skilled, because if you're managing memory, if you're manipulating these things, you need to kind of know what you're doing. Otherwise, you could lead to again opening your company up to vulnerabilities from hackers, and not a good day for your company. C++ jobs also vary on the other side. If you're looking to finance, right, you can make a lot of money there, because if you know what you're doing, if you're skilled at C++, you can make start printing money, right? Like if you're working for a bank or investment firm, it will be paying you hand over fist if you're a good C++ programmer. And if you're looking to get into that, actually, one YouTuber I like to watch is Coding Jesus. He does like a whole series where he like asks people interview questions for C++ and stuff. So if that's something you're interested into getting to for 2026, check that out. So overall, yeah, a solid A tier. I think we should do Go next. Go is a strong language. The thing I have with Go is that it's not very widely known. A few issues with that. There's not a lot of tooling, not a huge ecosystem for it. But the developers are working on it. I think it's Google that made Go. They're working on improving it, and they made a lot of bug fixes this year, like better routing, better profiling, and they're making more optimizations to the language. The language is very simple to learn. it's fast, fast for deployment, and it's very good at concurrency. I think that's a big thing. Concurrency. It's like Google made it. They wanted to have a better concurrency system, but again, it's very very limited ecosystem. Like not really doing much with it outside of Google, but developers love it. Like developers who work on it, they love using it themselves. But is again very minimal feature set and verbose error handling. Error handling can be an issue with Go because it's just very large error handling. There's some dev jobs, more DevOps jobs with Go, and they can make like a decent amount, like 100K ish. Yeah, I say it's like a solid B tier language in my opinion. Next one we're gonna look at is Rust. I know there's some Rustaceans out there who love Rust. I say Rust is a S tier language. The reason I say Rust is S tier language is because it has a lot of the similar issues that C++ has, but it kind of improves on them. So for example, actually first I should talk about what are some changes they made this year. So Rust made some changes that make it more ergonomic, better async, friendlier compile errors, safer abstractions, and they're working on faster compile times and better async traits. And so Rust, like C++, is good at memory manipulation. It is also a C-based language, and so it has near C++ in terms of performance, and it has very good at tooling, like memory analysis, static analysis, profilers and stuff, right? So that builds on top of what C++ does, but it also helps a lot because the way Rust works is that it avoids these unsafe memory initializations, right? Because again, C++, you can have very unsafe memory initializations where you're reaccessing memory that's not initialized, or you free memory somewhere and then you're trying to access it again. And so Rust built a lot of their thing around being safe, being performant, and making sure that a lot of those foot guns that you have in C and C++ don't show up. There's still like some places where they can show up, but for the most part, it is a safer language to work with. And so even the White House has actually said that you should use Rust and C# for future development in the future because they are safer languages to work with. And funny enough, when the United States military was looking at a language to use for their F-15 fighter jets, they had to choose between Ada and C++, and they chose Ada because of those safety and memory issues and error handling that Rust worked to improve. So maybe if they had to make that choice again now, they might have chose Rust instead of Ada or whatever. We don't know. But yeah, there's a steep learning curve though with Rust because similar to C++, you need to know what you're doing. Because it is a more verbose language than C++ even, but it also has those memory issues, the memory management and the complexity of C++. So you kind of need to know what you're doing before you get into it. So if you do know what you're doing though, you can make a lot of money. You can get some pretty good jobs learning this. And there's a growing industry, like I said, with even the White House recommending that people learn this. So this is something that maybe you should check out. So Kotlin, I say, is a more A tier as well. So the reason I say Kotlin is A tier is because it's really the only viable option we have for Android development. There's not really much better options in terms of speed and productivity. So Kotlin has made faster compile time changes this year, and they've increased their multi-platform support. It's not great, but it's still better. And they're trying to do more iOS integrations as well. Because Kotlin is mostly based on Android, but they're trying to increase that support for iOS development as well. Why Kotlin is great is because it is, again, the only real option for Android development, and it's concise, null safe, and it has focused tooling because developers, it's like Google, and so they're working a lot on making those toolings available to understand what your code is doing and analyze your code for Android development. Kotlin is also built on the JVM, so it has that multi-platform support. So Java, because a lot of things with Java is that with their JVM, you can't just write the code once, and it works on different platforms because it compiles down to native bytecode for the CPU and for the language, or for the platform and the operating system. So it has that going for it. Kotlin has pretty good job support, like pretty stable jobs, because if you're doing any iOS, Android development, not iOS development, but any Android development, you are working with Kotlin most of the time because, again, it's the only best option, I guess. And it's very strong if you're looking to get into that. You pretty much have to learn Kotlin. I say A tier because it does have its downfalls. Lack of Android or iOS support. And I think reason why it's A tier really is because there isn't anything better. We do have other options, but for Kotlin, it's really the only thing. So I say it's A tier. If it had better iOS support, I say it'd be S tier, but not really not right now, and not really much competition for it. Next one I'll look at is in the same kind of same kind of mind is Lua. So Lua I say is a solid B tier language. The reason Lua is B tier is, I guess, advantages is that it this year they worked on improving their safer globals, and now we have Lua 5.5, which is better at memory management. And Lua is great for things like game scripting. A lot of games like Roblox, for example, Roblox uses Roblox Lua, which is like a subset of Lua, but all Roblox games are pretty much made in Lua. And other games that have mods, something like Factorio, their mods are written in Lua. And so if you're looking into getting to that like Roblox game development, which actually can make a lot of money, I've seen some jobs for Roblox game developers and they're offering some pretty good amounts of money. Or if you're looking to get into like game modding to learn and improve your skills, Lua would be something you should look at. And I guess where it kind of struggles is with their ecosystem, right? Because Lua is a tiny language in comparison to has a tiny support, tiny user base comparison to other languages like C++ and C#. And so you might struggle there in kind of getting the resources you need. And also the jobs. There's not as many Lua jobs out there compared to other larger languages. So it's still like an okay language to learn in 2026, but I think there's definitely better options out there. If you are, I guess, getting into game development, it could be useful for you because again, writing those mods and scripts for games, which games do use for Lua. Next, I want to look at Dart. So Dart is like similar to Kotlin, except that Dart kind of sucks. I don't know what you mean to Dart, but Dart is a programming language used in Flutter's engine. So Flutter is like a mobile development platform, and their whole thing is to be cross-platform. And Flutter project, in my opinion, is a bit of a failure, just because it didn't really focus cross-platform support. Like quite a few challenges they faced in doing that, and I guess a bit of mismanagement and bad decisions made on their side. There's always like potential for future improvements, but as it is right now, I think that project is not really going anywhere. So I think learning Dart right now would kind of be a dead end and not the smartest career decision, because it's a small like user base of Dart projects and companies that use Dart. Flutter isn't doing the greatest from what I've seen, but I'm not trying to like throw shots at the Flutter developers. I seen Flutter, I used Flutter before. It's great, it has a lot of potential. I see the vision. It's just that it hasn't reached that potential yet. But I'm excited to see what they do in the future. But I wouldn't really recommend using it or learning it as of this time. Swift is another one I put in solid B tier. Actually, A tier. Swift is Apple's native development platform. It's similar to Kotlin. It doesn't really have much competition, just because it's iOS is. If you're doing iOS development, majority of the time you're using Swift. It's what Apple developed it for. If you're doing Mac OS development, you're doing Swift, and it's great performance. It has a modern syntax. It's native Apple apps, and the disadvantage is that if you're locked into it, you're locked into iOS development. Like if you learn Swift, if your primary thing is Swift, you can't really do anything else than iOS development, because there is nothing else that uses Swift other than iOS. So that's not really a bad thing though, because iOS is always growing, the platform is always growing, always improvements being made, always jobs out there for iOS developers. So it's not a bad thing to be locked into Swift. So yeah, I say it's a solid A tier pick. R is a C tier pick. The reason I say R is C tier, I guess, is that it's more of a stats and like academic kind of language. So if you're more of like a enlightened individual, like a academic out here trying to learn knowledge and stuff, then yeah, R is good at what you're looking for. It's good at data analysis, visualization, and kind of doing research. But it's not really meant for general software development as a whole. And I think it still kind of has like a weaker market outside of like research and academia. And a lot of the things that R does, Python kind of just does better, in my opinion, though. Not like an academic or a researcher, so I could be wrong about that. But just like from what I've seen, I'd rather go Python. It has more tooling, has more support than R does. Groovy is another interesting programming language that I put at I say D tier, because Groovy is only really used for CI/CD and Jenkins. It's a JVM scripting language, so it's kind of meant for to work with Java and like kind of like Java's Lua, and it's meant to just do automations and things like CI/CD pipelines, mostly Jenkins, and it's not really used to build apps, and it's kind of like it has a stable market. Like there are groovy developers out there, very few of them, but the ones that are there, and they make okay money, and it's not really doing anything other than just Java Jenkins really. Okay, sorry. Next one I want to look at is Visual Basic. And so the thing with Visual Basic is that it's more like a automation tool than like a, I guess, programming tool. I mean, there are kind of apps, mini apps that are built inside of like things like Excel with Visual Basic, but it's more like if you're trying to automate your Excel workflows, your Excel worksheets, and it's like a kind of like a scripting language more than a actual developing apps or websites and whatever. So it's not very maintainable long term. I've had to work with a Visual Basic database, like a code base before, and it's not a fun experience. Navigating a Visual Basic work like code space, like a big one, is not fun. It's a bit confusing. The tooling there is not the greatest, and it's mostly just kind of for older legacy systems. There are new things like VB.net that is trying to build on that, but I say for the most part, it's kind of meh. I put it like a C tier. Not that many jobs for it either. One that I like a lot or find interesting is Perl. So Perl is more like like the original OG like scripting tool. It's still alive. It's not dead. It's even though it's older, and it's used mostly by sysadmins and legacy systems. And it's best at like huge text processing, quick scripting, or like older infrastructure that's already in. I guess the disadvantage about it is that it's not really growing. It's more shrinking. It's not dead yet, but it's kind of heading there because modern like software systems don't really use Perl, and a lot of things that Perl does is done by other systems. But it's still an interesting language to look at because it has had a huge impact on software development. And so I say it's like a solid D tier. I wouldn't recommend anyone really learning Perl for the most part. And the next one we want to look at is Elixir. So Elixir is a interesting language as well. It's built for concurrency and for reliability, and it's best at like real-time systems. I don't know too much about it, but I have some notes here. And it's good for like chat systems, messaging systems, and it's very fault tolerant. So it's good if you need some more reliability, but not necessarily the best of the best like systems. It has a smaller job market and a small ecosystem, but a lot of people who do use it do like this like Elixir, and there are some jobs out there for Elixir developers. So I'd say like it's not like a D tier, but it's like more like a C tier because it is a smaller pool. So if you are looking into it, you gotta be more skilled at it, just because there are less jobs out there for it. So Scala is another JVM language, and it's common in like big data, big science, and enterprises, and it's actually really good at handling complex data sources and data systems, and it's a functional programming language. So if that's something you're interested in, like functional programming and big data, that's actually where it works out. The issue with Scala is that it can be pretty complex to work with, and there's a steep learning curve. It's kind of growth for it has slowed down. It used to be like more like growing, but it seems like that growth is cooled off a bit. But it's definitely not like slowing. Like it's not like declining. It's still growing, just less growth. But it has potential, especially in the era we live in now, with everybody trying to do AI and big data and stuff, and AI systems need a lot of data. Scala might be seeing a resurgence with that. So maybe there actually has more opportunities the next year and the years to come for growth. So I would say like if you're interested in like big data and AI, I keep the Scala on mine, but I put it in C tier right now. Actually, I'll put it in B tier because it does have the potential for growth, but not necessarily where it is now. So Zig is one that I put in A tier. So Zig is a modern low level programming language. And funny thing is that with Zig, when they were figuring out which language to change the Linux kernel to, there were discussions between like something like a Zig or Rust. It eventually went with Rust, but Zig was a strong contender there. And so it kind of aims to be like a C with that low level control and memory management, but they want to do it with more safety. So their systems are like meant to give you that same control as like a C++, but without the potential downfalls of like memory management issues and like uninitialized memory and those kind of like a Rust, similar to Rust in that regard. The language itself is still maturing. There's a smaller ecosystem for it and not that many jobs, but the people who love it do really love the Zig, and there's a lot of hype around it. And so I can see that language potentially growing into something that could be a very, very big, very popular language. So I would, is that if you're a developer, I would keep that on my mind, just that potential for growth in Zig. So I'd put, yeah, A tier. Very, very fun, very lovable language. The next one we'll talk about is Lisp. So Lisp, I say is between C and D. Lisp is like a language kind of meant to build other languages. It's not really like building apps itself. It's more like building languages on top of it. And it's kind of like a more niche hacker language, not very big job market for it, and not a lot of mainstream adoption. But it's very loved. But there's a small group of people who use it, and those small group of people really love it. So I'd say like maybe a D tier. But if you're like looking for a hobby or something to get into, Lisp could be there. Erlang is another language. Erlang is like a C tier language because it was very strong in the past, but it's kind of fallen off. And so originally it was made to be like a reliable concurrent language because it was actually used in telecommunication systems. And so if you're doing like mass telecommunication, you need to have reliability and you need to have concurrency because you're gonna have a lot of different data inputs coming in at a time. And so it's always good on distributed systems and very fault tolerant. But because of the age of the product, there is a smaller developer pool, and it's a very well respected language for what it does. It's falling off in a way, but there's still a certain amount of jobs for it. But those jobs are more concentrated in like certain areas. So yeah, if you're looking to learn that, it could be a good job to get into, especially as a lot of developers who used to do it are getting older, retiring. I personally wouldn't get into it just because the amount of jobs out there are small for it. So I want to talk about Fortran. Fortran is another important language in the history of computer science, just because a lot of modern systems, a lot of ways we do things today are built off the things that were done in Fortran. So I say Fortran is a solid B tier language, just because it was like the king of scientific computing for a long time. It's still used in certain systems, and it's important for like numerical processing. It's good at handling large amount of numbers, pretty much. It's not very good at modern software development, the way we do things today. It can't really keep up with that, but there are certain jobs for it, especially in the research fields and more legacy systems. But overall, the job market is pretty weak, and it is shrinking as things that were done in Fortran are being transitioned into different languages. But because of the history it has, I do put it in B tier. I want to say if we're talking about strict learning, I might throw it down to C tier because there are a few jobs for it, but not that many jobs. I guess one we should talk about is COBOL. So COBOL, similar to Fortran, has an important impact on the history of computer science, but COBOL actually has a decent amount of jobs in it. The thing with COBOL is that a lot of mainframes, banks, legacy systems, governments all use COBOL because at one time it was one of the biggest languages out there. And so it's actually keeping a lot of the financial system alive because for a bank, right, if you're looking to like transition your systems into more advanced like language like C++ or something, there is a huge burden to transition because you're a bank, right? If something goes wrong, that's a lot of customer data affected, money. You have a lot of regulatory requirements. So you're very hesitant to transfer your systems. So they keep having to maintain those same older systems. And a lot of those COBOL like systems are made by developers who are now retiring because those are their older systems, right? And so if you're looking to get into something that might have potential job security in the future, I say COBOL. There's still a lot of jobs out there for it. They're paying very well because again, they're banks. Like it has money in the name. You'll make bank there, right? But there are potential downfalls involved as well because it is an older language. Eventually, I think it will be phased out. But for the meantime, like the near to long term, like 5 to 10 years, I think you'll still be doing very well there. And I don't think it's a language that AI can really replace, just because the institutions that need it. Ada is the one I mentioned earlier. Ada is was the one that I mentioned for the F15. And so Ada is similar to C, but it's built for safety first. Like that is the critical promise of it. It's meant to work in like engineering systems, defense, and aerospace, and it's very good at being like correct. Like you have to write it the right way. There's like one way that you write Ada, and they're very opinionated, and you either do it their way or you don't do it at all. And so that make sure that it has a high like reliability and very very good assurance. Because if you're flying like an F-16 or F-15 and you're in the middle of a dogfight and you get like a blue screen of death, you're dead. Like you literally a blue screen of death. So you have to have that reliability. And there's not a lot of like adoption for it outside those like engineering or aerospace systems. But if you want to work for like the Department of Defense or like a military or something, then it could be something you should be interested in or check out. B tier for that. OCaml is another interesting language. It's like a high performance functional language. I like functional languages personally, but it's like not the most popular language out there, but it's like good if you want to build compilers. So if you're someone working on compilers or interested in working on compilers, then OCaml will be there for you because that's what it's mainly used for, developing and researching compilers. Also good at, I guess, making fintech tools. I think some fintech companies use it. There's not a lot of jobs again for it because it's very niche, has like a limited market, and it has a decent learning curve that can kind of make it harder for people to get into. But if you're in it, you can make a lot of money because it can be used by fintech and compilers. People make compilers, Microsoft and stuff. The next one we're gonna look at is assembly. So assembly is like an OG S tier system. Everything runs in assembly. It will end up in assembly. Like if you're writing, for example, C++ code, eventually it does get compiled down to assembly. Assembly is the raw like code itself, like the computer understands. Is pretty much as close as you can get to like manipulating your bits yourself, and you're doing pretty much raw CPU instructions. And it's best at micro optimization. So if you really need like the most fastest, most optimized code, you're writing in assembly. And you're also good for doing embedded workloads. So if you're writing stuff like embedded systems, drivers, and things like that, then you're using assembly. And if you're interested in reverse engineering, that's also something you should check out with assembly. I think Denevo can be reverse engineered in assembly. Don't quote me on that, because a lot of the things that get compiled into is assembly at the end of the day. So yeah, like assembly has a lot of industry support, and it's not necessarily popular language, but people who are good at assembly will make bank because there's always such high demand for good assembly programmers because it's so difficult to do. There's very few people actually entering the industry wanting to do assembly. So if you are someone who can do assembly and can do it well, then yeah, you'll be wanted by everyone, like big tech, governments, defense companies. Pretty much everybody needs a good assembly programmer, especially if they do hardware or like low level programming. So yeah, assembly is definitely S tier. Can do everything. It's pretty much coded. Next one we're gonna look at is PHP. And so PHP is an old language. It's kind of like was very popular during the .com boom when the internet was just kind of getting started. And so PHP has been making a lot of changes. They're bringing in property hooks and clean attachments and things like that. But the next big thing with PHP that holds it back is that there's such damaged reputation, because back in the day PHP had a lot of vulnerabilities, and so this wasn't like a problem when it was first getting started, because back then the internet was early. There weren't as many like malware and bad actors out there. So when PHP was first being used, it wasn't a big problem. But as the internet matured and it became a whole cybersecurity industry and everything, PHP was targeted a lot because it had a lot of vulnerabilities, a lot of bugs in it, stuff like man-in-the-middle attacks and other attacks that really crippled companies that use PHP. And so this kind of led to a lot of people pivoting away from PHP just because of the security risk. Yeah, so there's still like a bit of demand for PHP just because some parts of the web still use it, usually on the WordPress side or the Laravel side. And so this does lead to a bit of demand because WordPress is a significant chunk of the internet. Not like a huge portion of it, but still it's like a sizable portion. So there is a lot of work, and more modern PHP has closed up a lot of those vulnerabilities and quirks that led to the reputational damage. So I think PHP is in a pretty strong position now, but I don't really see it as being like a cutting, like if you're looking for a cutting edge or like more long term, I wouldn't personally go into PHP because I do feel like it's slowly like over, I'm not talking about anytime soon, but like maybe a decade or two, kind of dying out. So I personally wouldn't go into PHP development, but again, if something that you're interested in, then go for it. But yeah, there's it's still a bit of demand, and it does have a decent sized ecosystem. So if you're looking for that's pretty good, and it's really good at getting websites out fast, which is why I was using during the .com boom, because everyone wanted a website out. So it's good at like production speed. It's just not very secure, I guess. So I'd say it's a solid like C. I'll put a B tier because it did power a lot of the internet, but for 2026, I wouldn't put it. I put it C tier actually for 2026, not Kotlin. Sorry. I put PHP C tier because it is not really the greatest in my opinion. All right, and finally we have a C. C I'd say is a solid A tier. C doesn't really change much. C has been the same more or less for the last couple like years. The language itself doesn't change, but they are making changes to improve the syntax and kind of made better tooling, better analysis tools, better profilers, which is always good when you're having a language like C where you have to manage memory. You always want to make sure everything's working well. C, the big advantage of C is that gives you a lot of control on your code, right? Like if you want looking for absolute performance, absolute control, then C is the way to go for sure. But if you're looking for more abstractions, less having to deal with the memory yourself, then C isn't the place to go. C also has the advantage of having small runtime binaries. So if you're concerned about making more efficient code and like I guess compact code for things like embedded programming, if you're interested in that, then yeah, C would be the way to go. And C is a foundational product. Like it's the foundation of every like browser, operating system, drivers. All of it's pretty much built on C. Is the language. It has a lot of memory control, right? So it's easy to write bugs, easy to introduce security vulnerabilities and flaws that can really damage it. Like C gives you a lot of power, but not any guardrails, which is what I'm saying. So it isn't like a trendy like language, like cutting edge or anything, but it is reliable. It is something that we'll always need. It's everything's built on top of C. So if you're looking for something more stable, like want to do a job for like next 40 years of your life, go ahead. I think C would be where you're at. And if you get good at C, again, it's the same thing with C++. If you're bad at it, you're not gonna get a job. But if you're really good at it, if you're decent at it, not like you're the best programmer out there, but if you're somewhat decent at it, C will do you good. And yeah, so that's my entire tier list. Let me know what you think. If you have any different opinions, if you agree with me, disagree with anything I say, leave a like and subscribe. And yeah, I'll see you guys next year. Stay good for your unk. Peace.